And welcome everybody to the glorious episode of the Put on Raiders podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas. I am podcasting off the beautiful shores of the Pacific Ocean. Beautiful day out here in Southern California for Ryan and I. I'm not sure Ryan Holmes is my co-host. I'm not sure if it rained as much as it did for you yesterday up where you live, but it was pouring. It was pouring. It was I feel like I was in Russell Wilson country out there. The way it was raining there yesterday. Our TPOW podcast is my Twitter handle, and RHOLM22 is Ryan. So those cool breakdowns. Make sure there wasn't much to break down this week, I guess, but he tried his best to try to break down some stuff for Raider Nation here on the Put on Raiders podcast. So San Diego, Butte, Montana, New York, and Miami, Florida are listening or watching the Put on Raiders podcast. 858-299-5592 is our text line. We had a couple comments on YouTube that I wanted to get to, but first let's hit those questions real quick. We do questions from the fans early in the show, not late in the show. Can't do that, can't do that. Mike from Washington wants to know what do we feel the bigger loss was, John Gruden or Henry Ruggs?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's an interesting question. You made me think about it a second. I'm going to say Henry Ruggs just because
yes, me too.
What the dynamic he brought to the offense, it's going to be very hard to replace the speed and the playmaking ability down the field as a contested catch guy at his size. Those guys don't come around very often in the draft. So that dynamic of a player is going to be tough.
Apparently every team has one.
They don't. There might be like three in the whole league. But,
seriously.
Replacing Gruden, that's also a huge loss. Clearly on third down they miss him.
Yeah.
But I think if we're looking long term at this, losing the potential of Henry Ruggs, who is 22 years old, is going to have a more of a lasting impact on this organization than John Gruden.
Yeah, to me, I think I'm always going to side with the player, because I think third down would be a little different if they had Henry Ruggs right now. He's such a dynamic. The thing about it is, the thing that really stunk about it was he and Carr takes Carr along to trust people, So, but he actually trusted him. They were making plays, and then what he was doing was the little comeback routes were all open now because people knew that if they try to bump and run with him, they can't stay with him. So that part of the offense really helped, really hurt that Yankee concept. All the deep stuff that really could help the team a lot. I mean, he gets separation. I mean, you don't have to get separation to throw deep, but that's a discussion for another time. But he was a huge part of what they did. So yeah, I always side with the player because the coach can be replaced at some point. Shane from Miami wants to know, with the COVID Browns, he called them instead of Cleveland Browns, he slashed out Cleveland. He put COVID Browns. How bad of a loss would this be if the Raiders lost if everybody didn't play, like everybody who was on the COVID list didn't play for the Raiders?
Yeah, this is going to be a bad loss if the Raiders go on the road to Cleveland and lose. They're missing they're down three offensive linemen. Jack Conklin went on IR. So if you count him, they're down three of their starting offensive linemen, their quarterback, Kareem Hunt, Jarvis Landry, and three defensive starters. So if the Raiders go out there and lay an egg, I know weather's going to be a factor. It's supposed to be in the upper 30s, low 40s. It's supposed to be windy. There's a 60% chance of rain. This game's going to be one in the trenches on the ground. The Raiders' run defense has played a little bit better here over the last couple of weeks. So, this might be similar to the Grapple game of last year where the Raiders went in there and won 16-6. The only difference is the Raiders can't run the ball this year. Yeah. So, low scoring game. But if all those guys, there's 17 or 18 guys plus the coach now has COVID. If the Raiders go on the road,
the play caller too is going too. Yeah.
If they go out there and they lose like 24-6, 24-9, and they just lay an egg, it's over for that. The coaching staff's already going to be cleaned out, but it's really going to be over if they throw a stinker up Saturday night.
Yeah, no question about it. You can't have that. I really feel. Listen, This is your opportunity. I mean, that don't turn the ball. This is where you just run the ball and don't turn the ball over. Try to, I mean, like the wind factor, the mistake by the lake, whatever you want to call it, out there in Ohio, it can get very windy, very difficult. Maybe you have to go with the wind early. Try to get a lead, try to actually score touchdowns and points in the first quarter. That would be something that would really help the Raiders a whole lot in this game. So as long as they can do that, maybe they can stay ahead of the whole the gang out there in Cleveland. Jamie,
on that, I would say quickly on that note, if the weather is as bad as it's going to be, I'd love to see Peyton Barber in this game. Just give him the ball, tell him to run downhill, don't dance in the hole, run some power, and just try to run it. Even if it's unsuccessful, try to run it 25, 30 times and just see what happens.
Yeah.
So the Raiders need to commit to the run this week if the weather's that bad. And I would love to see Barber split carries. Give Jacobs and Barber each 12 to 15 carries and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think is Rashard back this week from the COVID?
I'm not giving him the ball in those conditions.
I don't want to give him the ball, period. So you're talking the wrong person. You're talking the right person as far as that goes. I agree with you on that. I might not want to give the quarterback the ball in those conditions, but we'll talk about that later. Jamie, Instagram, DM me about any news on Waller. We're not in Vegas, but we just go by what's going on with Waller. I'm not sure what's going on with Waller as far as that goes. He is the IT band is not. I'm not sure if it's healing or what's going on with that, but he's not. I don't think he's practiced since Dallas, right?
No, he hasn't. He hasn't even touched the practice field, so he's clearly going to be out this week. IT band injury shouldn't be, more than 2 weeks. So I don't really know if there's more to it here. It's basically, the ligament that goes from your hip down to the outside of your knee is strained. So maybe it has to do with lateral flexibility, but he should be able to move in a straight line if they want to run him some vertical routes. So the fact he's not even on the grass at practice is concerning going forward if we're going to get him back here the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, was that who knows? We got to see what the issue is with that as far as that goes. Maybe that's Clutch saying be careful. You never know. That could be cussing. It could be saying be careful. Let's go to some stuff on real quick. As soon as it pops up. Should be on here somewhere. I'm not sure where it's. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I see it.
You see it? Okay, perfect. So we got Dave. We got David Super. Very good breakdown. Yes, Bradley can. We can also get more modern, a modern progressive defense. I just wish Bradley would just get rid of the rush 3, because I think we have enough defensive linemen where we don't need to rush 3. And I don't think it helps out a lot. And you've said you and I've talked about it for a long period of time about his lack of. There's times where you got to blitz, no matter how much pass rush you have, you still got to blitz and put pressure on the quarterback.
No, definitely in this game, it's still, maybe it had to do with the younger guys. Diablo playing a lot of snaps. The KJ Wright had to play middle linebacker. It seems like they benched Littleton in the middle of that game. He doesn't have a lot of options. They're using Merrick in man coverage. They use Merrick on third downs against Travis Kelce, but then you got to put Levitt and Abram back there and too high. When he tried to do it, it didn't work. Yeah. Is Gillespie that bad that he can't get some snaps? I know he's back practicing, but they took him in the 4th round. Maybe mix it up. Levitt's clearly not the solution here. So maybe get Gillespie some snaps. Just, it might be 5 or 6 downs a game. It can't be any worse than the product they're running out there now.
Yeah, no question about it. Alex Fitzgerald, he loved that Nick Van Exel reference, which I think is hilarious. Oh, that was hilarious as well. Also at the end said a great show, so cool. I appreciate that. And then Earl Hall, most intelligent breakdown of the Raiders by far on YouTube. All these other Raider podcasts pale in comparison. We appreciate that, and I totally concur with that. So let's roll.
No bias.
No bias at all. I'm not biased at all. If I'm gonna be biased, be biased towards yourself. You got to be. First thing was, and I think we can. I just want to find on the rundown real quick. We have to talk about the Derek Carr kind of sympathy tour, right? This is where everybody and their grandmother, Colin Cowherd, everybody who's criticized Derek in the past is now saying, we feel bad for Derek for having to put up with the Raiders, So real quick, I mean, and I think Ryan and I can go back and forth on this pretty cleanly. First is like, number one, the checks never bounced. They built the team the right way. They've given you life-changing cash, and they've asked you to be the quarterback of this team. They built a fortress of an offensive line early in your career. They also gave you a guy who, when his career is over, his stats might take him to the Hall of Fame, and Amari Cooper. That could be debatable, but I'm just saying, like, everybody knows Amari Cooper is a tremendous wide receiver. Also gave you Michael Crabtree, who is, on his own, how good he was. Marshawn Lynch played with Derek Carr.
Jared
Cook played with Derek Carr. Latavius Murray played with Derek Carr. Some really talented players have played with Derek Carr, and I'm not gonna, and now the second time around, he's playing with Deshaun Jackson. Go look at all time. Go look at the active yards for players right now with Deshaun Jackson. He still can get deep. Brian Edwards. If you don't use him, that's fine. I mean, I can have a nice car. If I don't ever turn it on, how do I know how good how do I know how good the car is with Brandon Edwards? If you're looking for 10 yards of separation, no receiver gets that. So as far as that goes, so he's played with some talented groups. So to sit there and say like this is like the poor Derek Carr, I'm just gonna push back just a little bit. I think this year was tough, losing the play caller, losing his a guy who was really getting really close with Henry Ruggs. That was tough, but besides that, I mean, I'm not gonna. My heart bleeds for some things. Derek Carr would not be one of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. The media has kind of taken a turn here in the last couple of weeks because of everything that's happened in Las Vegas. By all accounts, Derek Carr has been a good teammate to these guys through this grievance process they've had, with all the adversity the team's faced. For me, I go back to year 8. This is a no excuse year. Last year was supposed to be the no excuses year. Yeah. This year was really supposed to be the no excuses year. Clearly, the Raiders misjudgment when they thought they could go younger, more athletic on the offensive line. That has not worked out. Any Raider fan will tell you that. They don't have 3 Pro Bowl offensive linemen. There's not a lot of teams around the league that do. There's no Donald Penn. There's no Kelechi Osemele. Yeah. There's no Trent Brown. There's no Rodney Hudson. There's no Gabe Jackson. And that was by design. So they could bring in, Yannick Ngakoue on the defense, so they could go get Casey Hayward, so they could afford to go get a KJ Wright, some guys to help there. The defense has played better in spurts. They've held up their bargain for the most part in these games. This team was not built around a defense that was expected to be a top 10 or 15 defense. All we asked was, league average would be great. If you could get to 20th, that'd be awesome. We can look at the points column. I think that's a little inflated because the offense and special teams has given up 28 points and 4 touchdowns. They're about a point and a half over league average per game if you take those points away. And if you just look at the 2 Chiefs games, obviously they didn't play well in either one of those games. But for the most part, they've played well enough to keep the team in the games. This team was built around an offense that was supposed to be a top 10 offense, and clearly they've not lived up to that. And the offensive line is a big reason to blame for that. But at some point, the quarterback, just has to make plays. He's got to throw it down the field. He's got to take chances. And Derek's done that. But at times, we go to it's unacceptable no matter who you're playing with in year 8 if you're like second worst in the league on third down and you can't score in the red zone. That they've never been able to score in the red zone with Derek Carr, other than his rookie year, which was an anomaly because the sample size was so small. Mm-hmm. He's never been good in the red zone. So kind of everything's caught up to him. Last week, the offensive line got dismantled by the Chiefs. There's no getting around that. He didn't have much of a chance in that game, and the game got away early. But if we want to look at around for the rest of the year, there's plenty of games where he did not play well enough The Bears game, the Giants game, winnable games that the Raiders should have won, and they would not be in this situation right now if they just would have gotten better quarterback play, or maybe a drop here or there, or they ran the ball a little bit better. And today I dove in. Pressures is a funny number to me because I look at 3 different sources. Pro Football Reference, which is kind of what I use because it's public. I can get to it easily. They had the pressure rate in the Chiefs game at like 25%. Then you go to Next Gen Stats, they're at 35%. Then you go to PFF, they're at almost 45%. So where is the variance? What is a pressure? What defines a pressure? Why is it so vary from source to source? How can one source sit down and say it's 25% and another source say it's 45%? Clearly one of them is wrong. It's probably somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah.
And Raider fans act like, Derek Carr got killed on Sunday, and he didn't. It was their worst game. Then you turn around. So let me recap that. Next Gen said it was 35%. You know what Next Gen said Justin Fields faced this week? 54%. So as bad as it was for Derek Carr, it was 20% worse for Justin Fields. No one's talking about that. And when you look around the league, I went and looked at PFF because everyone wants to use that. They think that they're the gold standard. They say the Raiders have the 29th ranked offensive line when you factor everything in: run blocking, pass blocking. They're probably right. They're somewhere in the bottom 10 of the league. But when I started, I looked around, who are the other teams that have bad offensive lines according to them? And it jumped out quickly. The Dolphins have the worst offensive line in football. You know what the Dolphins have won? They've won 5 games in a row. Then you start looking around. The Steelers have a terrible offensive line. They're over 500. The Vikings have a terrible offensive line. They might make the playoffs. The Seahawks have a terrible offensive line, which is okay. They're not going to make the playoffs. But then the Bengals are in the bottom 10 in the league in offensive line. They might make the playoffs. The Ravens have a terrible offensive line. It's not really stopping them. They might win the division. The Titans have a terrible offensive line. The Bills have a terrible offensive line. They can't run the ball at all. So we can make every excuse we want, but what Derek Carr is facing, there's a lot of other teams in the league that are facing the same situation. So we need to look at it outside of that and in totality. And like I said on the podcast on Monday, I think there's an 80% chance Derek Carr's back next year, one way or another. I think there's a 20% chance he's not. But that doesn't absolve him from any blame here. And he's in year 8. He's the face of the franchise. They've done everything they can. They've tried to structure this team every way they can to help him. And then, obviously he lost Gruden and Ruggs, and the dynamics changed. Now the dynamics, like, why can't the defense be a top 10 defense? Well, that was never the plan going into the season. So why are we blaming the defense? If we want to blame anyone, blame the offensive line. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, and I think to me, like and we talked about it as well. I think we both had a mouthful on that one. But because they're just kind of annoying, but because they're annoying by the whole sympathy thing. But real quick, we don't blame Derek Carr for every single thing that ails the Raiders. That's irresponsible. That's not stupid. Yeah. I mean, that's stupid. That's not our show. We're not. But like, I can't just give him and just be like, okay, it's over. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't say, okay, nobody else is working under these conditions. There are people, there are quarterbacks, there are teams who are working in the same conditions that Derek is, and their season isn't, I mean, and it's not over. Like, I mean, if you want to sit there and say, oh, but Kirk Cousins got all these receivers. Does Tua have those receivers? Does Tua have those skill position players? Because they won how many games in a row? Like 5 in a row, when they won in 5? Like, you know what I mean? So Miami's on fire right now with Tua.
Where's the run game in Miami? There isn't one.
There isn't one. So like, they're finding a way to make it happen. So like, this idea that you can't make it happen, like there are people who are quote unquote worse players than Derek Carr, and they're not, and they're not. I'm not saying they're thriving. They're going to win a Super Bowl, but they're at least knowing how to manage it. And then again, you Tyler Heineke, Denny Dimes, Justin Fields. All 3 of those games, if you want to blame the defense in all 3 of those games, the fourth quarter came and the Raiders defense gave up less than 20 points. His career record, and I'm not even big on quarterback career records, but his career record is not really good when his team scores under 20 points. So like, I mean, or when his defense scores under 20 points. So like, come on, like let's just.
I think
go ahead.
the best way to look at it is Derek Carr the problem? No, Derek Carr is not the problem. But is Derek Carr the solution?
To every yes.
That's the real question.
Yes.
The answer to that, probably no as well. So while he's not the problem, he's not to blame for everything that's going on in Oakland. He's also proven I don't think he's the answer long term. And like we've talked about, if you really want to step back, you're facing Justin Fields and Patrick Mahomes. This team has a lot of holes. They're not going to compete, in my opinion, for 12 wins a season. They're not competing for the AFC West in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. The timelines don't match up with Derek Carr's career when this team's going to be good again. If they can get multiple early picks in the draft for him, I could see them moving on from him. If they can't, keep him for a year and see what happens. It depends on who the coach is. But for everyone to act like he's a top 4 or 5 quarterback in this league, he's not. It's Cinderella. The clock struck midnight. The glass slipper is gone. It's a pumpkin again. Like he's somewhere 11 to 15, like right where he was before the season started. So we can go off on passing yards and think that's the ultimate stat. But at the end of the day, when you really dig down and you look at red zone, when you look at third down, when you look at the number of touchdowns, he has 18 touchdowns in 13 games. I don't care who you are. That's not very good in the passing league. And he has 13 turnovers again. So the turnovers are starting to creep up. Mm-hmm. It's not his fault. They fumbled 4 times against Kansas City. No one's saying it is. I'm
throwing those 2 games out. Honestly. Yeah. Throwing those 2 games out.
But you have to beat the Bears when the defense holds them to 17. They kicked a late field goal after a late turnover. They basically held them to 17. And when you hold the Giants, they scored 23, but Derek threw a pick 6. The defense gave up 16. You can't lose those games.
Yeah. What game was it? The Washington football team, they had 14 points. Yeah. People actually criticizing the defense for giving up a touchdown on the first drive of the game. They did not give up another point until the 4th quarter of that same game. Yeah. So it's just a little too much. And I mean, it makes no sense. Go ahead.
One other thing on the Washington football game, everyone wants to act like, well, Derek gave them the lead, 2.5 minutes left. They were up 15 to 14. Well, if they scored a touchdown there, a little bit different. But do you know what the win probability was when the Raiders kicked the field goal to go up 15 to 14? It was 50.2% or something. Basically, It was a coin flip.
Yeah.
And then that situation's happened where a team's taken a 1 or 2 point lead with under 3 minutes 13 times this year in the league. And the team that got the ball last won 7 of those. So they've won 7 out, more than half the game. So people acting like the defense just threw up all over themselves on the field and lost that game. The odds were they were going to lose that game the minute they didn't score a touchdown in that drive.
Yeah, never let the facts come. Never let the facts stop a good story. Raider Nation.